All right. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you may be. Thank you for joining us. Another episode of Catching Up with Jacob. And of course, we have him here all the way from South Africa, Jacob Prash.
Blessings in Jesus from Cape Town. We've been in Bloemfontein, Johannesburg, Port Elizabeth. Now we are in Cape Town, soon coming to Utrecht, Holland.
Very good. Thank you, Jacob, for being with us. And I'm hoping that the reception there has been going great. People have been coming out and visiting you. Praise the Lord for that. We also have David Lister from Tennessee, down in the South.
It's good to be here. It's been a beautiful week in the South and looking forward to this catching up.
Amen. Thanks, David. And Jay, down the street from my house, not too far, locally, fellow Californian, Jay.
Howdy from a Texas transplant.
You're muted, brother.
Howdy from a Texas transplant.
That's right. Hey, you are too, huh? Yeah, so am I. So praise the Lord for that. Things are coming. Now, way south, it's Davey. How are you, Davey, down in Australia? How are you this morning?
Doing pretty good, thanks. Marco, good to be here with you all.
Always a blessing to have you here, brother. And of course, we have an announcement from the Netherlands, and we have our brother Gert coming on. Gert, how are you? And what do you have to say today?
Yes, good evening, everybody. For me, it's a good evening, so good day to you all. It's always, both a privilege and a blessing as well to be on, and very exciting because we're in preparation for the third Montreal Holland Conference with nobody else less than James Jacob Fresh, and that is up for coming weekend. So thank you so much for letting me have the chance to announce that for the coming weekend, the 26th and the 27th of August this month in my town of birth, actually, Utrecht, in the middle of the Netherlands, Holland.
Very good. So that's next weekend, actually. So that's coming up very, very fast. So, Jay, do we have that flyer up, or can they see it? Okay, very good. And that would be wonderful. Utrecht. There's a lot of stuff going on in the Netherlands. I think we should bring Gert another time to talk about this stuff. I think it's very valuable to see what's going on there, especially in Utrecht and all that concerning. Well, I don't even know who the prime minister is anymore, but.
Well, you will miss nothing. If you don't remember his name, you'll miss nothing. Trust me.
Did you want to do it in your language there, Gert?
Yes. Oké. Goedenavond allemaal, beste luisteraars die Nederlands verstaan. Dat betekent natuurlijk in de eerste plaats wanneer u zich in Nederland bevindt, maar misschien ook in de andere Nederlandstalige locaties, België, dus Vlaanderen, maar misschien ook de voormalige koloniën. Misschien zelfs wel Zuid-Afrika. Ik wil u van harte uitnodigen om niet dit weekend, maar het volgende weekend, dat wil zeggen zaterdag 26 en zondag 27 augustus, te komen naar het clubhuis van Douwe Beat Soul and Jazz Sociëteit in Utrecht, waar wij onze derde Montreal Holland conferentie zullen gaan houden met niemand minder dan James Jacob Prash. En opnieuw zal het thema zijn de gemeente en Israël in de laatste dagen. Dus u bent hierbij van harte uitgenodigd om te komen naar de conferentie in Utrecht. De deuren gaan open om 10:30. Het adres is de Spoordijk 17. En wilt u meer informatie, komt u dan even informatie vragen via de mail. Dat kan via info@montreal.nl, info@montreal.nl. Of gaat u even naar de website, daar staat ook het telefoonnummer 0658 753 405. Daar kunt u op bellen of op WhatsAppen. Dus ik hoop u allen van harte daar te verwelkomen met deze conferentie in Utrecht. Ik dank u wel voor uw aandacht.
Thank you, Gert. Thank you, Gert. Since we don't know who the prime minister is, can Jacob run for prime minister? I don't know. Can you go in
Jacob for president?
Yeah, I don't know. I think he might save the cows and the farmers. I think that would be good. I think that would be good.
Yeah, I would.
Well, Mark Rutan's gone, and I vote for Jacob. I'm not a Dutch citizen, but I would vote. Thank you, Gert. And well, we probably need Jacob in a couple of places, but he can start there in the Netherlands, straighten that out there over there. So
Well, it would be a very good thing.
God bless you. God bless you, Gert. Thank you.
God bless you all. Thank you so much.
And that's coming up next weekend. So make sure you get a hold of it. Make sure you get a hold of that information if you want to, if you're there in the Netherlands, and come see Jacob Prasch. All right. Well, let's a couple of things we want to announce. Anybody have some announcements? Jacob, you got anything?
Well, our final date in South Africa will be held tomorrow in Cape Town. The details are available on the Morio website.
Yep.
If you are in South Africa, if you're not, it doesn't pertain to you pretty much at this late date, but we shall be in Cape Town tomorrow, then coming to Utrecht. And after that, we shall be coming to the United States. Those dates will be announced shortly by David Lister in America.
That's right. Well, you'll be here, Southern California as well. So praise the Lord for that. And you also got a fellowship drive that you're coming out. So very good. David, I don't know if you got all the dates, but we can leave it out for next week if you don't have all the dates. But I know he's here on the weekend of the 16th and 17th in Southern California. So make a date of that and come see Jacob Prasch in Southern California. That would be good. And
is that 15th and 17th of October or September?
September.
September.
Yeah.
Okay.
He will we'll also be having Appleton, Wisconsin on the 9th and 10th. That's Saturday, Sunday there after Jacob arrives. Then we're going out there, and then we have a little small fellowship drive, which we'll put up later, but also there may be a stop in Texas and another one to be announced. There'll definitely be the last weekend that Jacob will be in the U.S. in October. He'll be up in Baltimore and New York. Those dates are coming soon.
Very good. Awesome. Praise the Lord. All right. Well, with all that said, let's get started, and we got a lot to catch up on. So these are some of the things we can talk about, but I don't want to spend too much time because we got so much to talk about. But it's the indictment of Trump, the fourth indictment. This is the state of Georgia. These are state charges, not federal charges, which is kind of brings up an interesting thing. Can the president be pardoned over state charges? I don't think he can. But nonetheless, this is the fourth indictment. This is the fourth indictment, and it's getting really hairy for the nation here in the States. Jacob, don't want to spend too much time on it. Any initial thoughts on the fourth indictment, even though we don't have a whole lot of information?
Yeah,
on
it's
it?
politically motivated by a left-wing, racist black woman prosecutor who's politically motivated. As Alan Dershowitz, himself a liberal Democrat, said, these charges are spurious. How can you bring indictments based on Instagrams? It's absurd. It is just political harassment. And it serves two purposes. One, they're trying to prevent Donald Trump from being the nominee. Secondly, they're trying to divert attention away from someone who should be indicted, Hunter Biden, and someone who should be impeached, Joe Biden. It is just the usual corruption of the Democratic Party, usual corruption of the mainstream media. That's what it is. That's all it is. The illusion of democracy.
Quick thing, Jacob, and I wanted to just switch gears real quick to what Biden's doing in the Maui fires, because this is a big issue here, is the fact that with the Maui fires, he absolutely refuses to answer any questions, no comments, while the place is completely destroyed and people are moving in like vultures to grab a hold of that beautiful city in Lahaina and Maui. They don't want to talk about it. Some Democrats are blasting the response of the Biden administration over this. American citizens, millions of them are struggling, yet he decides to spend billions on illegal alien housing and hotels right here in Newport Beach, right here in Costa Mesa. You can see it here, plus millions to Ukraine, with only $700 going to Lahaina citizens, people who lost their home. They're only getting $700 for the citizens there. Is this really?
Well, David Lister and myself, both very familiar with Lahaina. I've stayed there. We've been there many times. I speak, as you know, in Maui at a fellowship regularly, fairly regularly. It's a place that's known to us. It's known turf. But it was very much a new age type of place and very liberal Democrat. Again, somebody who would vote for Hirono or some of the politicians that come out of Hawaii, it's Democrats getting what they deserve. Now, I'm sorry about the fire. It's devastating. It's absolutely terrible. I feel sorry for the people who lost their homes and families and things of this nature. But when you voted for Biden, don't complain about what he does. And Hawaii solidly voted for Biden, very solidly.
If I may just add a little bit of context to what Jacob's talking about. So yes, he's absolutely right. Hawaii is very, very Democrat. But let me explain the reason why historically that is the case. The Bayonet Rebellion was done by Republicans. Samuel P. Dole, the first president of the Republic of Hawaii, Republican.
Of the Pineapple Company.
Yes. So that is why Hawaiians today they are scared of Republicans because they've seen what Republican politics did in their history. That's why the Democrats have a stranglehold there.
David Lister, while this is happening and Biden is ignoring the people of Hawaii, seemingly nothing's being done. It's still a lot of closed off, and even people trying to get food and water, and they're having a hard time with it. Biden's negotiating a sweetheart deal with the 9/11 terrorists and the masterminders of this. And while J6 political prisoners are being held in prison in closet cells, he still wants to run. He still wants to win. How is this ever going to go well for a new campaign for the Democratic Party, or do they have something else up their sleeve?
Well, you never trust a Democrat because they can always pull something out of the fire. And, whether it's Mr. Newsom, but he's got this albatross called California around his neck, and it's slowly going down the drain. But you have Biden they're allowing these charges to go on and on, actually almost like they're ruining him. So it's like they're trying to set him up so he can't run. I mean, he was going to be interviewed the other day on MSNBC, and his own campaign manager canceled the interview. So something's afoot, and maybe his total loss of his facilities is speeding up what they're trying to do. And they could run a dark horse campaign, so it's happened before in American politics.
I'll start with you and then I'll go back to Jacob real quick. But Biden announces that the New World, order, just to give us some gaps so the algorithm doesn't pick it up, is here. And this is how they run it. This is how they want to run according to the New World system. Do you think there'll be elections next year? I mean, I'm not talking about the Pollyannic ideas that people have. Oh, it's always going to be the same in the Constitution, stuff like that. But realistically, based on all the data and all the information and all the things that they pulled and are pulling from Trump to crisis, do you think personally there will be one?
Well, I have my doubts. I mean, anything I say would just be a personal opinion and speculation, but they could easily, I know American troops can't be allowed to fight against American troops, but if you had UN troops coming in and putting stranglehold, it's very possible. I don't know if you can take an American flag off and put a UN flag, and then that would overrule the Constitution and American law, but then Democrats don't really care about American law or a Constitution. I think the way things are accelerating today, it's not something that can't be ruled out.
Because I'm thinking of the Civil War, which we've been talking about it for a while, and I know people disagree with me. That's fine. I think we're already in one, but not the way. When we say Civil War, automatically people think South, North, and they think blue, gray, and that's not what I'm referring to, because I don't think that's going to be fought that way. I think there's going to be a different kind of warfare, enclaves and pockets of resistance here and there. And then it's already like that in a lot of cases, philosophically and ideologically, it's already divided like that. But Jacob, do you think there will be one based on all the stuff that we see today?
I think there'll be an election, but I think the Democratic Party establishment is moving to rig it already. And these spurious Trump indictments are a part of it. So will the election go forward? Yes, it will. But I'd be very surprised if it was not to some degree rigged, particularly in certain states. So
let me ask you this. Who will be the Republican nominee?
as of now, Donald Trump, undisputably, which is unfortunate. I can easily envision, because of, again, the malperformance of Donald Trump's leadership in the midterm elections, speaking now as someone who voted for Mr. Trump twice, who appreciates his legacy as the best president of my lifetime in many respects, but I'm not voting for him again. His colossal failure in the midterm elections as party leader, it shows that he can lose the general election. Now, the election may have been rigged, but the next one will be rigged. But the abortion of which he has personal responsibility that took place in Pennsylvania, the political abortion, Donald Trump is responsible for what happened in Pennsylvania with Fetterman. He's also, to a large degree, responsible for what happened in Georgia with Herschel Walker, who was no match, as I've said, for Warnock. Donald Trump exhibited extremely weak leadership. A man who's beleaguered, who's legally besieged. I don't think he's thinking clearly. He certainly wasn't thinking clearly in the midterm elections. The other fear is, I don't think God's hand is on him, in the sense it might have been at one time, because he hosted that homosexual and lesbian gala. He actually promoted homosexuality and lesbianism. Why should I vote for him any more than I'd vote for a Democrat who did the same thing? So I'm not confident God's hand is on him because of what he did. And I'm not confident in his leadership ability at the present time, to say nothing of the fact that he's beleaguered. It may be in the mercy of God that these unjust indictments are taking place. So just possibly an alternative candidate, I would love Mr. DeSantis or someone like that to be the candidate. But then could DeSantis be the Democrat? That's the next question.
Yeah, he's so low on the polls and he's been just misfiring on all cylinders. It's
Yeah.
been
Losing his staff. And the other thing is, what I can see precipitating a division in the United States, not necessarily of the Union, but certainly there's already an ideological division, but certainly something that will push the nation to the point of crisis is this. Newsom and his ilk have driven California to the wall of fiscal collapse almost. How much debt can you accumulate as a state? New York, Illinois, anything the Democratic Party touches turns to garbage. And they're all in deep muck politically, in the sense that the red states don't want to bail them out. They'll be demanding that the federal government, the taxpayers from red states, bail out and pay for the fiscal irresponsibility of California, of Illinois, and of New York. They will be demanding that. They'll try to make conservatives pay for their programs, such as giving benefits to illegal aliens and all this other garbage they've done. That is something that I can see precipitate a national crisis.
Very good. I did want to remind everyone, we are live in many different platforms, from Rumble to Vimeo to Telegram, YouTube and Facebook, of course, but we want you to go, of course, to Memorial.tv, memorialtv.org, and there will be our flagships. And of course, we're also on RTN and other platforms. I think those are the only platforms that we have now. So we appreciate you watching, and those who will watch later. And we will be taking questions on Backstage. At the end, we'll be taking questions, and we have a whole lot of sections on Backstage that we want to address, including the issue of Canada and what's going on there. And you would be, you would be remiss if you don't watch what's going on in Canada and what Trudeau's doing there under the WEF banner. But one thing we know for sure here in the States, as well as other parts of the world, Jacob, David, the twin rise. There's a twin rise here. Suicides and drug overdose hit record highs in America. So I'm talking about America. We talked about Australia before. Davies gave us a lot of information on Australia, and there's much information about Canada and the UK in terms of rates of suicides and drug overdose. But the new data that came out, it's staggering. It's staggering. And this is, of course, by the CDC, which I don't have a lot of faith in, but they did admit 50,000 people took their own lives last year, a record high. From the year before is up 3%. So a new trend is happening that more and more young people are committing suicide. More young people have lost hope. More young people gone into drugs. They've gone into the occult, Satanism. I was reading about Minnesota having a family day summing up demons. This is up at the Performance Arts Center. The society's like that. Lawlessness, complete lawlessness. And even among white males, the percentage of suicide is through the roof. Now, on those two things, suicide and drug overdose, and maybe we can add a third one, the occult activity among young kids. Jacob, can you make sense of it? And can we point these things together and say, this is a societal problem that is now it's just unbelievable. It's out of control among young people taking their lives. It's not just depression. It's not just mental illness. It is now taking their own lives.
When you look at what's happening or transpiring sociologically, you have to understand what is happening spiritually. What really undergirds it? This is the power of Satan. A nation or a Western civilization that has turned its back on God, belief in God, and any kind of biblical compass for its direction, or any kind of a sense of Judeo-Christian heritage for its identity. These are the inevitable repercussions. There are contributing factors, such as the diabolical policy of Mayorkas and Biden to allow fentanyl to come across the border in large quantities to kill as many youth, particularly Black and Hispanic youth, as possible. The Democrats love to kill Black people. They love it. That's the abortion policy. That's the defund the police, the gun crime in Chicago. They seem to love dead Blacks, and they seem to enjoy the fact that they get Blacks to vote for their own death. This is an absolute tragedy. But these deaths are also happening among middle-class whites, particularly with the fentanyl, and Hispanics. Okay, so that would be my first sense. But let's put the blame where blame is due. Jesus called us to be salt and light. When you have a church run by an antichrist spirited Stephen Furtick, Elevation, the most popular youth ministry in the United States, a man saying, I am God Almighty. Or when you have Bill Johnson and Bethel, or when you have Andy Stanley, or Hillsong from Australia, which had a major legal development this week. When you have these things taking place, and this is the church that the youth have to go to, the likes of Carl Linz and the Houstons and Furtick and Mike Bickle, what do you expect? They don't have a biblically based alternative to give them Christ anymore. There is no viable evangelical church that is in any way in a position to do hardly anything on a national scale. Now, that was to a degree true in the 1960s and the 1970s. God worked outside the mainstream denominations with the Jesus movement, the revival among the hippies. If something does happen, it's obviously going to have to happen outside of the existing churches and denominations again. The Southern Baptists have committed moral and spiritual suicide. Calvary chapels, after Chuck Smith left, Calvary chapels, as we've known them, have fragmented. Many have gone into error. The Calvary chapels are not what they were and will not be again. They lost their opportunity. Unfortunately, there's no Chuck Smith now. It would have to be a move of God that took place outside of the visible church as we know it. Now, will that happen? I can't see it happening, any sign of it happening, but I don't limit the power of God. Now, let's move on to look even further at this situation. When you have churches compromising on feminism, women pastors, compromising on homosexuality, claiming to be born again, people like Tony Campolo, claiming to be saved Christians. And Rick Warren, likewise. If this is what you're looking at, if you're looking at Joel Osteen and Rick Warren, you got a problem. There is no church that is being salt and light. There is no church capable of stopping this thing. Yes, we know about the corruption of Hollywood, the corruption of the politicians in Washington, etc. All of that is very, very true. And of the homosexual activists, all that is very, very true. But the Lord did not call politicians, homosexual activists, or Hollywood celebrities to be salt and light. He called the church to be salt and light, and it isn't. So what does Jesus say it's good for? Nothing to be trampled underfoot. That is what has become of most of Western Christianity, tragically and unfortunately. Not all of it, but most of it.
David, the epidemic of suicide, of course, as Jacob's talking about among the young, it's rampant. There's a spiritual vacuum. And I was reading, this is from 2021, the rate of suicides among pastors in the ministry is also very high. 1 in 10 admitted contemplating suicide the past year. So between 2020 and 2021, this is according to Logos, which is a Bible teaching software. There's a lot of pastors signed up for that. So if the society's like that, the church is like that, I don't want to be, this terrible pessimistic individual, but what really hope does kids have of somebody sharing Christ with them and preaching the gospel to them if pastors themselves are struggling with this? I mean, this is a worldwide epidemic.
Yes, unfortunately, the biblical literacy, even among pastors, is really influenced by psychology and psychiatry. So it's not based on a biblical knowledge. As I've gone around the United States and I talk to people that like Moriel, but have looked for a church. They've actually looked for church. And one guy said he's went to every church almost within 30 miles of his house, and he couldn't find anything. And he said the best he could find were some NRA that taught milk. And he said, those guys are off. So this was common. We went all the way from New York down to Florida, all the way from the bottom of Oregon to the top of Washington. Everywhere it was the same story. They can't find a good church. And these are people that are more mature and want to be in fellowship, but can't find it. And it's not like they just don't go. They actively looked and pursued. And so they're forced online. And yet what happened is the people that are knowledgeable, when they do try to do good and everything, they're hampered by the society. We're seeing arrest of Christians. We're seeing you preach or you even go pray silently. You're being persecuted by the police. And so this will further slow down the spreading of the gospel, because people, if you're not mature and you don't understand that God's given you a spirit of boldness, not one of fear, then it's just the gospel is not going to be spread. But I mean, I'm still out there witnessing. I love witnessing. I love traveling to places everywhere. Even during the day, I would go out and talk to people, and we would talk in cities and stuff. So there are faithful people out there and that are doing it, but it's just a remnant. It's just a remnant. There are a few good churches. I don't want to say that there's not, but they're few and far between. But there are a few. And then within bad churches, there's actually a few good people, that are holding fast, but it's a struggle for them. But then after the fellowship drive, we've had several groups form outside of the system and are fellowshipping and growing somewhat, but it's small. It's small. So for the world, the only hope is Jesus. But for us that are faithful, maybe we will see him come and rapture us. What a privilege that would be, and so hang on. We do have a hope. If you have a hope, pass this hope on to other people, those that you can, and if they don't listen and they reject it, there's others that need to hear. Just keep going, be faithful, be found at work.
A very brief update on what's transpiring here in South Africa. And I hope at some point we can have a catching up from South Africa with some of our South African teams and colleagues, because it is a very interesting place. I believe the way that South Africa is going is the way much of the Western world, including the United States, is going. It's just that South Africa is further down the path. Be that as it may, this week, the BRICS conference is happening. And Macron from France, who already signed the 51-point agreement with China, announced that he would not support any position in defense of Taiwan. He would not stand with the United States or with any of the regional allies in the Pacific region. France has no problem with Chinese policy towards Taiwan. That's just France. What do you expect from France, the country that chose the Vichy government when the British were fighting at Dunkirk and had 66 divisions and wouldn't fight Hitler? Some French did, but the Vichy certainly did not. Or that pulled its troops out of NATO and hit on back of the Americans and British during the Cold War. Well, this is, of course, just France being France in the opinion of many people. But Macron has made overtures towards BRICS. Now, how that would juxtapose itself with the fact that France is committed to the euro, I'm not exactly sure at this point, but it would show that BRICS is not going to be a currency so much as an exchange rate mechanism in the short term. It's going to be a frog in boiling water, but Macron is making overtures. He also did a gas deal with China priced in yuan, not dollars, not in euros. You'd think he would price it in euros, in his own European currency, but he didn't. He pandered to China, and he's pandered to China over Taiwan, and now he's pandering to China again over BRICS. The yuan is in trouble, as is the ruble. The yuan is in trouble, as is the ruble. Hence, Russia and China both have an incentive to move towards another mechanism other than the euro dollar as the basis of the world currency reserve. Additionally, Mexico is being engaged, much the same as the BRICS countries want South Africa because it has gold. They want Mexico because it has silver. Mexico is a silver-rich country. The implications of this for the United States economically, having Mexico in BRICS, would be absolutely stupendous, but it's what is happening. And it would not be happening in the way or to the degree or at the speed it is had it not been for the irresponsible financial, fiscal, and economic policies of the Biden or the Joe Obama administration. Janet Yellen powers the Fed, etc., with their quantitative easing, with their printing money like there's no tomorrow, and of course, with inhibiting oil production. If you're going to take the United States off of the Saudi Arabian dependency for the petrodollar's value based on oil, you can simply replace it with the American oil production. But Biden is against that as well. He thinks he's moving in a green direction, which is technologically impossible, as was already proven in Germany. So the developments with Mexico and France, added to the developments with Saudi Arabia, are quite concerning for the future of the dollar and for the future of the United States. It is only the fact that all of these countries themselves, Russia and China, are in trouble, as are their currencies, and South Africa's economy is hideous. India is the wild card in all of this. The United States, in the eyes of Putin, defaulted on treasury bills by freezing Russian holdings of treasury bills, and then, of course, blocking Russia from the SWIFT system, blocking Russia from the SWIFT system. This is being represented in BRICS as what Nixon did when de Gaulle was demanding gold for the US dollar, and Nixon went off the gold standard. Essentially, de Gaulle said America was defaulting on the dollar, which they replaced with Saudi oil. Well, now the Saudi oil is moving away. The Saudis are selling oil and yuan to China. What is going to come next? They want it to be something that will emerge out of BRICS. These events taking place this week in South Africa, where I am, require a considerable amount of prayer, and they can have long-range repercussions for the United States particularly, and for the global economy. This is like something that will be on the scale of what happened at Bretton Woods or what happened in 1970 with Nixon. It's of that magnitude. Let's move on very quickly also. Biden is holding joint security talks. I got 5 minutes. Joint security talks with Korea and Japan. We have to remember something. Not only Australia, but Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan have the capacity to develop weapons-grade plutonium and have sufficient uranium enrichment capacity to make weapons-grade fissionable material within a year. They can become independent nuclear powers within a year. Japan and South Korea have effectively operated under the US nuclear umbrella until now. They see how the United States has backed away from Saudi Arabia, and Saudi Arabia has moved closer to China. This scares them. It certainly scares Japan, and it scares Taiwan. I've been saying for several years, you can see a nuclear armament in the Western Pacific, The outcome of these talks will be interesting to see. I'm not putting a lot of emphasis on it because Australia is not participating in it, neither is Taiwan. However, it does show the way things are going. I have no doubt that Japan and Taiwan, if forced to, will develop their own nuclear deterrent. Finally, Australia. The new policies of Wong and the Australian government towards Israel is shocking. This is a left-wing government. It's not just what's taking place in Victoria with David Andrews. It's what's taking place in Canberra. I will bless them that bless thee and curse them that curse thee. As a man who loves Australia, I no longer like the Wallabies, the rugby team. I used to love Matthew Burke, who was my favorite kicker of all time. After what they did to Israel, not the nation Israel, but the player Israel, because he spoke up on homosexuality. Davey, what's Israel's second name again?
Sorry, Jacob?
Israel, the rugby player who they blackballed.
Oh, Israel Folau.
Yeah, the way that man was treated was shameful and disgusting. Australia is going against believers. Now it's going against Israel. And this is not good for Australia. Interestingly, Argentina, which has a gross history of anti-Semitism, has a potential presidential candidate, a potential president who is very pro-Israel and who wants to move the Argentine embassy to Jerusalem. So while Australia is moving against Israel, Argentina may be moving closer. I pray that happens. Finally, Brian Houston was found not guilty of not reporting his pedophile father to the police. But the court affirmed what the Royal Commission affirmed. He actually did it. He failed to report this sex crime to the police. The verdict said he was not guilty because he had what the court considered to be a sufficient reason for not doing so. His claim was that the victim didn't want it to happen, so he didn't report it because the victim didn't want it to happen. But the verdict said he's not guilty on that basis. The verdict didn't say he didn't do it. As the Royal Commission said, he did do it. So that is what Hillsong has come to. But Brian Houston has had the audacity to come out and say he was being persecuted. He was being persecuted. The audacity of that man is unbelievable. The events in Australia this week are quite troubling. Maybe Davey would like to comment further. Finally, the F-16, the first time fighter aircraft. Now, the F-16 is not an F-35 or an F-22, but it is a good plane. It is being provided to the Ukraine. I don't know how much of a game changer it's going to be. What I do know is the Ukraine has turned out to be a humiliation and a catastrophe for Putin, but an absolute decimation, an absolute Holocaust for the Ukraine. Please, God, may this thing end. So it is. I hope to join you next week when I'm back in Europe and Britain for a full session. Thank you so much, and God bless, and please keep South Africa in prayer. 28,000 people murdered last year.
God bless you, Jacob. And thank you very much for catching up. Rest up and have a wonderful rest of your conference in South Africa.
I'll do my best.
God bless you, Jacob.
God bless.
David, any thoughts on the local fentanyl problem here in America? Obviously, there's problems in Europe as well with the poor man cocaine that's coming in via the Middle East.
The drugs keep getting cheaper and more deadly. It's interesting. I saw an interview of it happened to be a black man who sold drugs. He had his face kind of covered, and he said, you know, like in my day, you didn't want to have anybody overdose because they were a customer. This guy said, oh, when we have a hot sale out there and people die, man, it triples, doubles the business. So apparently people have death wish. It's a culture of death that has come upon America, from the suicides to the doing of drugs to just the hopelessness that we're seeing in young people. The Bidenomics are destroying young people's lives through inflation, which inflation's getting ready to go back up again, as even though they've raised the interest rates up as much as they can, believing this is how you solve inflation. At the same time, to cause inflation, Russia and Saudi Arabia turned the spigots off, which has raised the price of gas up again, and so everything's going to get more expensive. There's video out there of young people just freaking out because they can't make it. They've got a hopelessness, and when you have, because they don't have Jesus Christ and all they have is this world, and they saw a world that just a few years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, there seemed like there was hope, but now there's just a sense of hopelessness among young people. They can't afford rent, can't afford even working in some instances because they get better benefits from the government if they don't. So the world is upside down, and for young people, I understand why they're doing suicide. I mean, at least during my generation, we had a revival and people had a hope, and we were able to live this hope out, but through Jesus Christ. But now the only hopelessness they've got, it's breaking. It's heartbreaking when you see what's going on. They're having a food crisis with rice in the Far East. The price of it's going up. There's a shortage. So that's a staple in much of Asia. And
yeah, we'll come back to the economic problems, David. We'll come back to the economic problems.
Okay, sorry.
But the connection with the demonic, I know Jacob was just here.
Oh, yeah.
Not too much about it, but the occult, he didn't, I don't know if he remembered it, but the occult practices within the societies, within Europe, within America, you have satanic clubs for kids. And this is open. They want to have as much liberty as Christians have liberty, because they say they're a religion and a philosophy. So demon summoning.
I saw that I saw it advertised in Salem, Oregon.
Oh man.
I mean, advertisements, learn how to do it. And I've seen other advertisements where you can bring and have family. It's family night out to summon demons.
Well, we used to have, ice cream night and a family movie.
Yeah.
Now we have so many demons. I mean,
Yeah.
Is it a surprise that society is this far gone and young people are so succumbed to depression and mental illness, where you have a spiritual vacuum in the church, but then you have the occult right in the middle of society?
And openly people are, saying, "Hail Satan," over and over. They're actually calling for his time to actually come. And well, he is coming.
So, David, what do you think it's the aftermath of this? I mean, things don't happen in a vacuum. Obviously, things have led up to this point, but things are not just benign and they're going to go away. What is as you look down, what is the next level where this could go?
Further and further de-evolution of our society. I mean, Paul says in the last days, difficult times, and he describes the people that we're actually seeing now. You see all these things, a lot of them in California, of these flash mobs going in and robbing stores blind of hundreds of thousands of dollars. 150-year-old store is going to quit San Francisco. So you're going to see more and more intensity as people, one of the things is people will be without self-control, incontinent, and they'll just be out there just running mad in the streets, and you'll see violence increase. And these are the things that Paul talked about, but it's also what Jesus talked about. So there will get even more. Sexual perversion is rising. We saw last week, we talked a little bit about, even the UN says that we're going to get rid of Christians if they don't accept pedophilia. So this is where the whole world is going. It's spiraling downwards.
Yeah.
And Christians, I encourage you to get ready. Just examine yourself see that you're in Christ Jesus, and look at the signs of the day. Compare them to other signs that are around you. Just keep comparing and looking. Is this what Jesus told us in advance would happen, so that we would know who he is? And that's important for us to understand.
Yeah, I wanted to go to Jay real quick. Jay's also in the media. It's also in entertainment. It's also what people watch, from TikTok to social media, the demonic aspect, the occult aspect, but also just give up on life, don't have children, live for yourself, work for this job and have no children. That's being glorified now, when it used to be that the family was the center and I guess the culmination of a life was to have a heritage and to have children. But now young people don't have that, which it involves, the depression and the mental illness, plus the demonic aspect in culture and movies. How do you see it? What's your take?
In a sane and rational world, you base your budget upon an income of the taxes you get from families. And unfortunately, we are completely off the farm in that respect. We spend, and all the world's governments are spending now in such ways that there is no sense of reality. That's why there is despair, because there can't be hope as long as governments can basically make wealth from air.
Yeah.
And that's what they're doing. They're making it from air. And what's more, they're investing in things like green energy, which is, we want to get there, but we're not there. So why do you push something that's not there? Why do you keep hindering prosperity to people? On what basis do you do that? And I think the most demonic side of it is this system that we're building. There is no hope, because the things that you had when you had a family, you had a future. You wanted to see them get married. You wanted to see your grandchildren. You wanted to see the perpetuation of the people you cared about. But as people are going into selfishness, let's call it, and just focusing on a career, all of a sudden there is no hope, because once you're gone, you're not going to care anymore. There's a nihilistic spirit on back of today, where it's like, yeah, I don't care about anything. I'm just going to take mine and forget what happens for the future. And we as believers, we can't do that. We want to see that our faith is perpetuated. We want to make sure that people are discipled. And yet people today, the young folks in particular, All they want is to make sure that they have enough of, really, it's fun and entertainment.
Yeah.
And there's a ready supply waiting for them that
Yeah.
makes them want more.
Yeah. So illicit sex, no consequences of it, abortion and plenty of drugs, nihilism basically, and no spirituality because they can't find any true sense of spirituality. As David was pointed out, a remnant and God's spirit being poured out is it's what we need, but it may be a small remnant, smaller than we actually think. I want to move to the economic side of it because we touched on it.
Can I do one last thing there, Marco? Just one little thing?
Quickly, because we got to move on.
Okay, there was a guy that wrote a 19-volume epic of the history of civilization, and when he finally was ready to publish they held a press conference, and he was asked by a reporter, is there anything common to civilizations to show that they're broken and they're falling? And he said, oh yes, and he said 4 things: the rise of homosexuality, violence in the society is normal, the breakdown in the family, and the corruption of government. He said they're irretrievably broken.
The millionaire hedge fund manager, Michael Burry, his story is in the movie Big Short. He's been talking about, of course, the market being the same as it was in 2008. So if you haven't watched the movie Big Short, it's an interesting movie. And he just recently bet against the stock market, basically about $2 billion, that the stock market will go down. This has sent a lot of people into maybe not shock. I think a lot of people knew they were in trouble, but now he put his money where his mouth is. Most of America doesn't even know what's going on. Most of America can't even afford much of what the current economic system demands. So are we going to see, David, just that kind of plummeting of the economy, where you have Americans not be able to even afford a $400 emergency, not working, no jobs, not spending? So there's this feedback loop. The companies are not getting money because no one's spending. They have to lay off. They have to produce less. So there's less of those products. So it becomes more expensive. But things are just heading the wrong direction. But with the nihilism in society, people, drugged up and having illicit sexual experiences, I don't know if people even some people are, and I think we're going to talk about that too. But where is the economy going, you think? And we've been talking about this for 3 years now, and we've been saying it, and it's degrading now. But where is it going to go?
Well, I read an article this week. Is the stock market looking at it like 1998 or 2008? And that's what Mr. Burry's doing, is he's looking that it's going down. There's rise in people can't get home loans. People have a hopelessness there. So you have a society. Look, the stock market has not been doing well. Techs were doing well. Now they're headed back down because people are seeing that there's problems in the market and there's a lack of funding. China's economy is collapsing. Its young people are out of work. So no more investment is going into China, which will underpin goods being built up. Also, in the meantime, you're having transportation problems. There's 200 ships backed up at the Panama Canal off of Singapore. Tons of ship not unloaded yet. So there's shipping issues, there's transportation issues. So all of these things are causing the cost of goods and services to go up and become unaffordable. And at some point, I know it's like everybody is trying to play the game of musical chairs, but there's not going to be any chairs when the music stops this time.
When the music stops, and there'll be no chairs to sit on.
They can't borrow more money. Saudi Arabia borrows money. Japan's borrowed money. We're borrowing so much that we spend so much, we're having to borrow so we can spend more. It's this sort of craziness that's going on. It's like nothing I've ever seen before.
Every sector, from real estate to trucking to shipping to freight line, It's going into some kind of problem. Yet you have people making $7 million a year, like Joey Bear and from The View, telling us the economy is great. They're just playing the fiddle while Rome is burning.
Biden at least is.
and the dollar's losing its dominance. I want to go to Jay real quick. All of Europe, it's all of Europe seems to be going into recession. Another country, Jay, went into recession. Estonia, Hungary, Netherlands, and Germany. Now, provoking this idea that it's the U.S. who's brought them into this no-win war with Ukraine, which is basically a war against Russia. And they feel that the Europeans feel that the U.S. prompted this, and I don't blame them. I think there was very much induced by the Biden administration, Obama administration, the three-letter agencies. All these agencies have provoked this war since 2014, and it's been a major, major problem for Europe, more than the U.S. And so, are we seeing the European, what they call the European empire, toppling faster than the U.S. empire, faster than the Chinese empire?
Well, I think that the European empire is built upon American military strength in the first place. What is NATO? But NATO is basically a club of people who are maybe putting in 10% while the U.S. puts in 90. I mean, it's ridiculous. If the United States government, with all of its power and its might and all of its weaponry, can't win a proxy war against Russia, it really kind of shows the Europeans, well, if we individually got into a war with another power and US promised to help us, we're not gonna be helped. And no matter what, our people are gonna be slaughtered.
Yes.
It's shaking them to the core, and they realize that they have put their faith, unfortunately, and I say this as an American that loves this country, in a paper tiger. A tiger that will make sure that you had just enough rope to hang yourself.
Yeah. So they provoked this war. They can't finish the war. There's no off ramps to the war. There's nobody that wants peace.
There's not enough weapons.
It's apart from maybe Trump. It's the only guy that I know that with some leverage that can say, hey, we need peace. I say the U.S. blew up the pipeline, and people may disagree with it, but I have very good reasons to think that way. And it just keeps getting worse and worse, and there's no end to this war. So the Europeans feel that they have to clean up this war. Are they going to sit down with Russia and say, look, we were wrong, let's clear it up and leave the U.S. hanging? What do you think, David?
I don't think there's anybody that can stop this war. It's just like, except for maybe a Trump or somebody that actually wants it to stop. But it's like the people that pull the strings of power, they don't want it to stop. Yeah, we've been in endless wars for the last 75 years, and Trump had us out of the endless wars.
Yeah.
And had negotiated a safe withdrawal out of Afghanistan that Biden blew. And it's just caused so much trouble. And now that we're in this war, which there's not enough weapons to defeat Russia, conventional weapons. But right now, the world is actually stockpiling doomsday weapons.
Yeah.
And by the way, to your point, David, I have to say, I wonder if maybe we, instead of leaving all the weapons for the Taliban and the Afghanis, if we maybe picked them up and gave them to the Ukraine, you think we would be in the situation we're in today?
Well, I think if we'd pulled out of Afghanistan the right way, we wouldn't have the Taliban selling all this and all these weapons and fueling all sorts of evil things worldwide. And also now we're on the cusp of Iran testing its first nuclear weapon. Now, what's concerning about that, if you remember some time back, Mr. Netanyahu said that they won't let them get that far. So if you remember his picture with the time bomb.
Yeah.
So the world is, Mr. Burry may be right, but he may not get to see his profits.
Yeah, no, you're right.
Nobody's gonna have any money if the bombs go off.
Yeah, let's talk about China real quick, because the dynamo of Asia, second largest economy in the world. If you look at their figures, they've come out for the last 5-6 years. We're bigger than the States, we're bigger than Europe, we're bigger than Canada, Australia, New Zealand. But now the signs are that they're not, and they're declining very quickly. And you see these policies that they have for themselves. The COVID policies, the zero COVID policies, have come back to haunt them in a big way. But their economic numbers are down. The GDP's down. Even JP Morgan reevaluated and lowered their forecast. China's youth it's over 25%, if you believe their data. Unemployment. So you got a lot of young, angry men without jobs. The economic death spiral. Real estate's imploding. There's no COVID economy anymore. $23 trillion that they spent over the last 3 years. So food hunger, food crisis, a hunger that's coming, social unrest. David, when a country's desperate, do you think they move rapidly toward a military conflict?
Well, politicians do. They invented a term. It's called wag the dog. In other words, you go out and you make the dog wag so they don't look at everything else. And that's something that does happen. And they go to war to get people rallied around the war, rallied around nationalism and their country. And then they lie about who started the war. So look, the world is setting on powder kegs everywhere, because people are just so at ease. And also we know our politicians today don't have the restraint that they used to have about total annihilation. People think they can actually go to war and maybe win one, and that no one wins in war.
No, it's absolutely true. Look at China facing food crisis, their economic time bomb. Jay, maybe the CCP will be added to that death toll that they're thinking of having, the SCCP members. I guess time will tell, but people are going to be very upset. They have 1/5 of the world's population, yet only 9% of arable land. That means that they have to almost every time thread the needle in terms of getting the right production, plus import quite a bit of stuff. But that has not been happening. It's been a disaster. Does China go into Taiwan?
China going to Taiwan it's just a matter of when. It's going to happen. Whether they achieve it by diplomatic goals, which they've been trying for years, and you see political parties rising in Taiwan that actually want reunification. To your point about the food, now this is where it gets interesting. You have the Chinese all over Southeast Asia estranging former allies for fishing rights in not just South China Sea, but also all the way out in the Pacific. You have them challenging the Philippine Sea. Everywhere they go, they're challenging. And then you had the naval exercise off of Alaska, where they were directly showing naval power in challenging American waters, basically. So you're going to see China definitely exerting and trying to not only rattle their sabers, but I think you're going to see them going after some of these resources that they desperately need, like food. I mean, you talked about the rice production is down. You talk about a country that is dependent on rice. It is China.
They just went through a purging of generals and officials recently. Some of them lasted only like a few months and they were gone. I think something's happening way beyond what we can even speculate. But this leads me to the BRICS conference. It's happening next week, 22nd, through the 24th. Putin's not going to be there, just online. Somebody else is taking his place, but he'll be there online. Lots of interesting things. The president of South Africa, Ramaphosa, he's trying to, show the world that there's not going to be this killing of farmers, which we have already talked about, that the Kill the Boer and all that songs that that the EFF was talking about. But here you have an interesting thing. You have China and you have India, which for a lot of purposes, they've always been enemies. They've always fought over territory and the borders and all that. Could it be a situation where China is desperate enough that they need India's production, they need India's agriculture, and for that reason, they'll let them pick maybe their border if they back them in Taiwan? I mean, India is a nuclear power. They have a large number of population, the largest one in the world. I think they bypassed China recently. So India is a big play in this, and they're right in the middle of BRICS.
Well, for BRICS, and I mean, right now the rupee is down. Not anybody wants it. Nobody wants the yuan, the Chinese money, and so it's going to be interesting. What people will have to be trading in this BRICS, I believe, is like what I think you talked about earlier before the program, is that people will be trading their money for products and such as oil or food or something like this, but it won't be a massive economy that's based on their own currency. And so they have this basket, but I don't know that it'll buy them. What they really want to do is to be a world power. And to displace the dollar, because everything's going to have to be digitized just to stabilize everything, because there is no money, there is no credit, unless they just make it out of thin air.
Having said that, David, real quick, looking at the countries that want to jump in on this, and there's about 41 countries that want to jump into BRICS, including Saudi Arabia, including Iran. But not only that, there's another one that it's called the Belt Road Initiative. There's a lot of countries that want to sign into that. The Shanghai Cooperation Organization, they want to sign into that. All this stuff is in the East.
That's okay.
It seems that economic unity is happening in the East to get away from the West. Russia's controlling the grain coming into Ukraine, India and China's relationship, joint military efforts. Are we going to see this polarization, East-West, but so dynamic that you're gonna have, let's say, either a choice, you're gonna have a choice, major currencies in the West or in the East, one built on debt, the other one may have more natural resources like BRICS, but still, you're gonna have a problem either way. One question that I have is the Saudis. According to what I wrote down in my notes, they're on every one of these organizations, Belt Road, Shanghai, and they want to be on BRICS. So does Argentina, so does Mexico. The one that's interesting, so we'll talk about Saudi, and then the other one that is going to shake up the world if they go, it's France. Macron asked to go to the BRICS meeting. He was rebuffed, he was rejected. It almost happened, but he is one of the G7s that wants to go toward the East. If he goes toward the East, if Saudi Arabia gets into these initiatives and to BRICS, what does that say for the rest of Europe and the rest of the dollar? Are they going to follow? Are they going to follow Macron? Are they going to invest more? Well, as France is a big player in the G7, are they going to go that way? What are your thoughts, David?
Well, Saudi Arabia has the lubricant of the world. Everybody at this point still needs oil to keep the machines running and to provide cheap energy to try to get it going. They want to trade with everybody and anybody for oil to keep income coming into their own country. So naturally, they would want to be involved in everything and try to make them an indispensable part of the world that people would be willing to protect to keep the oil coming. So I could see that being important, why they want to be everywhere.
Yeah, what about, I'm gonna switch over to Jay. Jay, what do you think about France? That would be dynamic, wouldn't it? You think G7, a G7 member going to BRICS?
I think that's a death nail in basically the EU as we know it. If France were to go over, and it's interesting, if BRICS courts them, it would be a major blow, and they would be the only player on the market at that point.
Yeah, I think Macron wants to go there. I think Macron definitely wants to go. I mean, he asked several times for this meeting, was rejected. I think he'll eventually get a meeting. I think he'll eventually get a meeting.
But what does France, I mean, at the end of the day, France has economy not even as big as California. I don't even think if it's even as big as Texas or even Florida. It's not, it doesn't have a big economy, so it would be a little player on the scene there, but it would be a fracture in
Yeah, they're
Europe.
part of the G7, David. They're one
Yeah,
of
I
the
know, they're one of the
Europe.
G7.
Yeah.
That's an invitation, but like I said, they're there, but they're never a big player. You know, they just don't have as big economy as many of these other places.
Well, I think BRICS is a challenge, is a
Yeah.
challenge to American economic dominance. It's definitely, if they get, the more countries they get into it, it starts to
Yes.
erode what we have here in America as far as California, Texas. I mean, our economy is the best, still, you know, pushing the world forward. But again, we've sent the manufacturing to China, and the economic aspect of our country is really at a very tenuous point in our history.
No doubt. You know how I tell that France is a big issue? It's when they said, I want the meeting, when Macron said, I want the meeting, Belgium freaked out. Belgium was so freaked out in the EU that it tried to stop it. Why? It's a fracture. Why? France is pretty, I mean, when it comes to Europe, it's a pretty big economy. It's not the biggest one, not as big as Germany, but it shows that if they go, you may see others go that way too. I
just looked it up. It's $3 trillion. Okay. And in terms of the world's debt and all that, I mean, yes, it is the 7th largest economy, but they could sell nuclear things, but they're really dependent upon America for their protection. And so maybe they're trying to play both sides of the street.
You know, I think they may be doing that, but I think it tells you one thing. They are not comfortable in the EU. They look at BRICS as something that they may want to do. And that tells you a lot about, you know, the way the Europeans think about the US and where it's going. I did want to mention Brazil, because Brazil's part of this BRICS system. They have a new president, which it was a whole lot of controversy what happened there with Lula da Silva. But the one thing that's really interesting, 2 things in Brazil. One, digital currency. They are moving very fast to that. Secondly, the persecution of dissidents, including Christians. I think there was a gospel singer who's outspoken against their Marxism and the communism that's coming into Brazil. She was arrested, similar to what happened here, in terms of people being arrested for complaining and pointing out some of the definite problems with the election. But the other one is homeschool kids, homeschool children, and homeschool families are also being targeted, because under the new BRICS, under the new president of Brazil, this is not being tolerated. Of course, Lula da Silva is a big WEF guy, big World Economic Forum guy. So, David, we'll go to you first. This is going to go a certain way. It's going to go sideways in Brazil. Very prosperous economy for years, biggest one in Latin America, one of the biggest population in Latin America for sure. And yet now a communist, open Marxist from the World Economic Forum, bringing in digital currencies and bringing in persecution against Christians. Boy, this is going to get really ugly.
Of course, we're the bad guys. Christians are the bad guys, because when we're removed, then the world will be able to do all the evil it wants.
Yeah.
And just like in the days of Noah. And so it's, I just hate to keep being so pessimistic, but you know, the way things are going, but I really am optimistic in that we will see eternal life, and it's easy to get off focused on that, but you're seeing persecution there. You're seeing the rise of persecution even here in the United States and Canada, of course, in China, everywhere. It's everywhere. I mean, Sudan, even in the Sudan, the burning. Pakistan is on fire. They're burning churches and killing. Even near in the Punjab where we've got our new church, it's facing persecution. So it's not just there, but it's Satan feels it's his time.
Yeah, you see countries like Niger, you see countries
Yep,
like Sudan.
Niger.
It is a very, very tenuous moment in history. Yet life goes on.
Yes.
We have to keep preaching the gospel and continue on to living for Christ. In Latin America, these things are going to become very difficult because of so much of the Chinese influence that's already been there, the CCP influence, and of course, this is all dictated in a way by the World Economic Forum and their push for AI. I was reading about the next thing in AI, which is already to the economic system, into the financial system, is to replace teachers with AI. Basically, your kids will be tutored by AI. Your kids are going to be having to, instead of teachers online, it will be AI teachers online. And that leads to quite a bit of an influence, doesn't it? From the World Economic Forum. I remember reading an article 5 years ago, and I thought it was fascinating. It was Schwab who's saying the way we get to the kids is by bypassing the parents.
Yeah.
The way they did it was through technology, because if you think about it, and he described it, I'm not giving him credit, but he described it well. He says, where do kids go for answers? They don't go to their parents. They Google it. They search it online. They ask, well, nowadays they ask Siri, they ask AI. They have very little influence on their children, their parents being on their children. And that is by design from the World Economic Forum. They want to break the bonds of the relationship with parents in order to make the kids more dependent on technology. You see that already, TikTok and social media. But now with AI, Jay, as we come down to the just at the end of catching up, by the way, start sending your questions in. We're going to be asking questions on backstage, so start sending the questions in. With that said, what are Christians, in your opinion and recommendation, what can Christians do to stop this avalanche of AI, social media, technology into, or well, maybe not into our schools, unless you're homeschooling them, but into our homes and into our churches?
You have to be involved with your child's life. You have to know what they like, what they're watching, what they're reading, and you have to be prepared to look at it yourself and evaluate it yourself and be able to talk about it with them. You can't be so self-involved with work. We all have to work. We all have to maintain for our families, but we can't, our first duty, especially to children, are to make sure that they're brought up in the way of the Lord. And we have to be diligent, because every which way Satan is trying to get at them, every which way, through Disney, through media, through Warner Brothers, every which way, Satan is trying to influence them. And so we have to be, we can't be too harsh. We can't take them out of the world, because obviously they have to live in the world too and learn. This is why this is why everybody else does it, but this is why we're different. That they have to have that choice. They have to have that education, and that education can only come from Christian parents. It's not going to happen anywhere else. It has to come from you as a mother, or you as a father, or you as a grandparent. They all have that responsibility.
Amen. David, we'll close out with you. We'll close catching up with you, and then we'll go right into backstage. Same question. What do we do? How do we fight against it, if that's the lack of a better word? Fight against it, hold off to it, resist to it. Basically a takeover of our family and our children because of technology, social media now more infiltrating with AI.
First off, you get a Bible and you read it, and then you follow the instructions in it. I know those are hard to do, but that's it, is you follow the instructions. Train up a child in the way he should go. Look, I know Christian families that are raising their children right. I know Mia probably doesn't want me to say this, but she's raised her kid right. Devlin, he knows the Lord and he's in school. Her daughter knows the Lord and her son-in-law, and they're believers, and you have to walk in front of your children right. You can't say one thing and do another with them. You have to actually live as a Christian. I remember as a youth pastor, my youth group, I took a survey once and they actually told me what was going on inside their house. It wasn't supposed to be, it was all supposed to be anonymous. I told not to put their name on it, but they all put their name on it. And I got to see what's happening inside homes, and which I never shared with anybody, what it was not good. And this is what's happening. People, the cultural Christianity of America is, yes, you sound Christian, you look Christian, you do have some good morals, but you're not living a godly life that resists the world and doesn't bring it into your house. You can have a border there, and you can have a border inside these ears and inside this heart to establish a stronghold of Jesus Christ there. And that's what every parent needs to strive to do, and then make sure their children are walking in the fear of God, and without it, the world is so deceiving and so distracting with all the voices they put inside young people's heads, even limiting their exposure to the internet. Probably you see, did you guys ever see that special where all those Google and Apple executives and social media guys quit social media and won't even let their kids get on the internet till age 16 because they knew what they developed had turned into something evil? Did you guys ever see that? Oh, it was pretty, these guys were saying what we did, we didn't think it would be used for that. And so they pulled out, they quit, they've gone out, their homes are not wired and things like that. They're trying to live off the grid. So that was interesting when the founders of these things, not the main head guys, but people that developed codes and did all sorts of projects and management. So I wish I could remember that special, but it was very interesting.
Oh, to this day, I believe I think it's that Zuckerberg will not allow his children to go onto Facebook. That tells you all you need to know.
Yeah. So if anybody finds out the name of that special, please email me. I'd like to watch it again. Tell everybody the name.
Yeah. Oh, one thing I just wanted to add to with, look, AI teaching and the impact AI is having on kids and kids' lives. One thing AI is never going to be able to do is love. And
yes,
look, we need to invest time in the children. We need to invest time with them. Don't ever underestimate the time that you spend with your children, reading them a story, praying with them.
yes.
Every little thing you do, every little moment you spend with your children make a difference. It was my mother who taught me to pray.
Yep.
My mum never actually went to church. That's another story in itself, but never underestimate those little moments that you spend with your children,
Yep.
where you show love to them, love in truth, tell them the truth. That's something AI is never going to be able to do.
Amen. Amen. Appreciate it. Well, thank you so much for being with us and catching up. We're heading to backstage, so that's another part of the episode that it's going to be really interesting. We're going to be talking about Canada and what's going on there and the problems in Canada. So if you got any Canadians on, join us there, get on the chat, ask the questions. We'll be having David answer some of the questions. We'll jump in and answer them as well. So thank you so much for being with us. God bless you guys. See you on Backstage. We won't be on YouTube and Facebook. We'll be on the other platforms. So if you want to send your questions, go to Rumble. We'll see you soon.
Hello, and thank you for watching Moriel TV. There are so many things that are happening at Moriel Ministries worldwide, from the Philippines to Japan, to India to Africa, and back to Europe and the United States. So many of our brothers and sisters are spreading the good news of Jesus Christ to this lost world. We are so thankful for your prayers. God has been faithful and has blessed us in so many ways. If you'd like to partner with our efforts abroad and at home, please take a moment to click the link in the description and help us as the Lord leads you. Thank you very much, and God bless.